Okay.
All right, good evening, folks. Welcome to our kayaking preseason webinar. It feels like it's been a while since I've seen some of you. It's good to see all of you, though. Again, welcome. Tonight, we're going to run down our return to activities protocol. Some of you have gone through that song and dance, but we haven't technically gone through it for kayaking yet. So we'll go through that, and then we'll talk about some of the kayaking season points that we wanted to touch on, some resources for kayaking that are available to you. And we'll go from there. Again, basics of Zoom, you guys have a little reaction button, which you'll see over, it'll be on the bottom of your toolbar, and it's got a little smiley face. You can use any of those buttons to kind of alert us if you have a question or want to, ask a question or whatever. Again, heart, smiley face, laugh face, whatever, have a good time with it. You can always throw stuff in the chat as well. We will be monitoring the chat as we go along here. But if you have a question, feel free to, Jim Russell's already got the crying face going for laughter.
Well, I know Zach's assuming everybody's going to give the little party explosion at the end.
The cheer button. But again, you guys have been on a lot of Zooms this past year. I think most of you have a good idea of how to throw in a chat for a question and or raise your hand, ask a question. Again, what we'll cover tonight, we'll cover the return to activities protocol, some kayaking specific stuff, and there are more questions about how would you do something within the protocol when it comes to kayaking and applying it to your program. We'll then go into the kayaking sports and season review. Nothing really huge and new for returning coaches in there, but just a few things we'll talk through along with some resources. And then the resources at the end, we will remind you that those exist. It's a lot of slides that you guys have seen before, but they will come out with the slide deck so that you can review them. Again, this is being recorded, so a copy of the slide deck and the recording will go on the coach resource page for kayaking as well. But other than that, we're going to roll along. Again, feel free to ask questions. We'd rather answer questions than you not ask them, of course.
Yep. Okay, so thanks, Zach. I'm going to cover this portion here on return to activity, and then we'll hand stuff over to back to Zach and to Jack if Jack's got his audio worked out. So, so hopefully you've all seen this. We're going to be covering the Special Olympics return to activity protocol and the adaptations within the realm that we can for Maryland. The document you see there on the screen, or the cover of it, is available on, you can link through our coach resource page. There's links throughout the slide deck. It's also available on the virtual movement and return to activity page as well. Strongly recommend that you download that and read through it. We'll cover much of this here. Also read through the slide deck. We're not going to read through everything that's in here, but we will touch on everything that we've got. So again, may be familiar with this, but for returning to activity in your area or for your program, you have to coordinate this with your area leadership. Your area director is essential to giving the yay or nay on whether you're going to start your program up. And that can change based on the conditions that you're experiencing throughout the season. Also, this is required. The protocol that we're walking through here, it's not an optional thing. It's not a recommendation or a suggestion. It's an absolute requirement. With that, it also can change a bit. As you notice, the most recent, the guide here was last updated today with some minor adjustments and such. Anything major that comes through, of course, we'll send information out to the area leaders, but it can be shifting. We've had several different changes over the course of the last 2 months, which we'll give you the most recent in just a moment. With this also, it still is a requirement for all athletes to have medicals, all volunteers to have their volunteer applications and their other certifications as well. And then there's also a new requirement called a Communicable disease waiver that we'll touch on later, that everyone who does anything in person needs to follow. Every program starting out in phase 1, and there's a couple that are outside of, are right now out of phase 1. But we'll talk through this and it'll make more sense. And then again, you have those links there to the virtual movement page. In addition, one of the challenges that you're going to, I know that you're going to be successful with, but one of the challenges is helping your athletes and to some degree your families as well and caregivers, helping them understand the new protocols. And some of them are challenging, particularly athletes who like to hug or shake hands or whatever. A lot of those things aren't going to be permitted until we're back in something close to typical, which is our phase 3. We don't expect that for a while yet, but we're getting there. We're getting there. So anyway, there's 3 recordings that were made earlier in the year. They build on each other. They're not repeats of them. And the links are here in the guide. And we recommend that you have your athletes watch them. Jeff Abel, who is our Vice President of Local Program Development, is the lead on this return to activity stuff. He is looking to have some additional sessions for athletes that'll be standalone and kind of review stuff in the next several weeks and such. I don't have the dates on those yet. So again, there's going to be some redundancy. The redundancy is good because that means it's important. The guidelines that we have here are requirements. They apply to any situation where you are an in-person, activity with athletes present. Includes practices and trainings, meetings, competitions, and so on. Again, it's required, not just recommended. You'll see the standards that Special Olympics has put forward. They may be different from what they are for the state of Maryland, including, as is noted there, the state of Maryland just made a change yesterday. And also you have to look at your local jurisdictions as well as if there's any requirements from your facility that you're utilizing. In any of those cases, you need to follow whichever protocol is the most restrictive. So in the case right now, yesterday, Maryland, this is not 100% accurate, but for summary purposes, it's fine. Maryland changed the regulations so that people don't need to wear masks for most outdoor situations and then have a 50% maximum occupancy limit for indoor and outdoor venues. In this case, as we go through and look at the Special Olympics protocols, the Special Olympics protocols are more restrictive, so we will follow those. The other note there is that we have partner with several school systems for our high school athletics program and such. In those situations where we're partnering with another organization, but they're really running the show, they're going to follow their own protocols. So you may see some things that are a little different. You may see, like for example, several programs are starting track and field or bocce within their high school. And they have somewhat different guidelines. They're following what the schools are. That's to be expected. Don't let that throw you. Nothing's changed. It's just that they're following their schools. Also, you don't have to return to activity right away. And you need to look for your own comfort level and such. Discuss all that with your area director, and he or she will assist you in helping make those decisions. Talked about the phases. Phase 0 was the phase that we were in a year ago when everything was shut down until I think it was the end of June. Most counties right now are in phase 1. What that means from a functional standpoint is that you can have in-person programming, in-person training, where there are groups of 10 or fewer participants. And when we're talking about a participant, we're not just talking athletes, we're talking athletes, unified partners, coaches, volunteers, potentially family members or others who are in the immediate area there. In addition, you need to maintain physical distancing of at least 6 feet throughout. There's no direct or indirect contact. When we say direct contact, that means one person touching another person. That's not permitted. In addition, in phase 1, there's no indirect contact, which is a person touching an object and then another person touching that object without it being sanitized between. While we're in phase 1, that's a requirement as well. And the next item there, the no shared equipment sort of follows from that. In phase 1, screening needs to take place. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And the CDW, this communicable disease waiver, is required for everyone. Okay. I mentioned about groups of no more than 10 participants. You can, in situations, you can potentially have more than one group of 10, but those groups need to stay physically apart by at least 50 feet at all times, and you can't have any intermingling of the group. So you can't, a track program is the easiest. I'll just use that as an example. You can't have a group of 10 people at the starting line of the track, another one over at the jumps, and another one over at the throws. And then after they then switch, and 5 of the folks from the runs go to the jumps, and the other ones go to the throws, and they kind of mix all together into new groups of 10. Can't do that. They need to keep that group of 10 together throughout. So there may be an analogous situation for kayaking. In phase 2, much of the same is still in place. The biggest change, there's 2 big changes for phase 2. One is those group sizes can be up to 50 people. And again, that counts athletes, partners, coaches, volunteers, anybody who's in that immediate area. You can have up to 50 people together there. Assuming that your facility allows that also. Again, remember, whichever is most restrictive. And then you'll notice that we still have the physical distancing of 6 feet. No direct contact continues, but indirect contact can be done. So, a coach could take a paddle and hand it to an athlete, which wouldn't be permitted in phase 1 because unless you sanitized it somehow in the middle of that. I don't know, you can have a third person with a spray bottle or something, spraying it as you hand it off. Screening is still required, and the CDW, or the Communicable Disease Waiver, is required as well. At some point, hopefully, it may be over the summer, it may be in the fall, we're hoping to get to phase 3. Phase 3 is essentially, things are pretty darn close to normal. And you'll notice then there's no group size, there's no physical distancing. The contact issue is not an issue, or a contact requirement. The CDW, though, is required. This is a new thing, and it's required for everybody, and it will continue to be required. We'll talk more about that later. Notice that we have a double-headed arrow down here. With that, the groups can, or your counties can move up and back down depending upon conditions, and that has happened. I think Montgomery County is a good example. They were up in phase 2 for a while in the fall. They came back down to phase 1, and I think Shelley, within the last week or so, they've been able to move back up into phase 2 for right now. It all depends upon the COVID incidents and so on down the line. So it can change. It can go back and forth and back and forth. Let's see, one other thing from here, I may have alluded to this. So we talked about groups of 10 or fewer. I'm sorry. So Al, the CDW is a communicable disease waiver, something that we received from our friends at SOI. There's such a giving group, and we'll be talking more about that later on. So anyhow, you're talking about the group sizes of no more than 10, no more than 50. One of the things that we'll talk about later is what about family members and so on down the line. If they are not in that immediate area with the group, if they're way far away, they don't count. If they're more than 50 feet or more away from where the group is, they don't count towards the total. But quite literally, everybody else does count for that. So with that in mind, so this is a summary of what we just talked about there. And so I didn't unhide that slide, but that's okay. So Zach, can you go ahead and pop up the first poll? So you'll see a poll here. What we'd like you to do is answer here and just indicate, check all of the ones that are there that would be permitted. Let me give you a back up here. So a little helper there. But everything will be permitted in phase 1. Check off all of them. You may have to scroll down to read the ones at the bottom, and then be sure to hit submit at the end when you're done. Okay, and Zach, I have no idea what count we're looking for. I'm guessing it's probably about 18.
Yeah, we're looking for about 16, 17, 18.
Yeah.
If we get in that ballpark, we will end the polling and share the results for you to talk about, Mike.
Yep. And some of you should be expert at this since you've joined us for several sports. So let's take another 20 seconds or so. And your answers are not being recorded. Don't worry if you're just trying to decide yes or no. Just pick a lane, and we'll see how you did. Okay, Zach, why don't we go ahead and close it and share the results, and let's see how we did. Okay, so great. Coach physically guiding the athlete's arm would not be permitted because that has direct contact. Handing equipment, again, direct contact. Or indirect contact rather with that. They could demonstrate, as is noted there, from a distance of 8 feet. They could use, not only could they use poly spots to mark the ground, it's an excellent idea, or other kind of visual markers. It's very helpful. Throwing the football back and forth, nope, because of, even though the distance is fine, but you've got the indirect contact. The soccer player kicking at an open soccer goal, that would be permitted as long as that player is retrieving their own ball. You throw somebody in there who's acting as a goalie, that's not permitted because you're going to have potentially indirect contact from that. Okay, good. We did really well. And again, some of them are a little questionable. Let's throw the second poll up, Zach. So who counts? I think I've said this 3 times for you. So let's see if we can get 100%. Which of these individuals there would count towards the maximum allowed, either up to 10 in phase 1 or up to 50 in phase 2. Check off all of them that would apply. And again, you may have to scroll down to see some of the potential responses. Okay, let's give another 10 seconds.
Yep, we're almost there, Mike. So
yep.
we'll cut it loose in a few seconds here.
Yep. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Great. Okay, so athletes definitely would count. Unified partners would count, assuming you have unified partners for your program, but they definitely would count if they're there with your program. Coaches, assistant and head coaches, volunteers, etc. Good. Most everybody got that. Family members who stay in their car or in the parking lot and such while things are going on, they would not count there because they're not in that vicinity of your group unless your parking lot is, right in the middle of your training space. They come in and they hang out in your training space. Yep, they certainly do start to count at that point. And then those who are staying and from 50 meters away and watching from a good distance, they're so far away they would not count with that. Again, if they're 50 feet or more away from your activity, then they would not count because they're essentially in another group, if you will, if you were creating another group over there. So great. Okay. So Zach, let's close that and we'll move on. Okay. So I am not going to read all this to you. This is in that guide that I mentioned earlier, and you saw that just got updated today. But this gives some more really good pointers and information on things that you should be doing, and you can kind of map out your prep for the season on this. So it's reminding you here that depending upon what phase you're in, what you need to comply with and such, suggestions on things to educate people ahead of time on prior to attending. We strongly recommend, and luckily people have gotten used to this now, given the year plus of COVID situations, but have a web session with your athletes, your coach. Actually, I would have 2. I would have one with your coaches and other folks that are helping you to run your program, but then also have one for your athletes and your family members and such, and really explain this is what it's going to be like. It is different from what they're going to be used to. And in all honesty, there are going to be some athletes, unfortunately, and maybe some coaches too, or other folks who can't handle the situation or can't handle the requirements that are in place for this. When we were shooting some videos that we'll see later, and John Bogaski got to be one of the stars of them, but he mentioned there were a lot of athletes who were getting really frustrated because they couldn't go up and shake hands or do high fives or do whatever. It takes some learning. Now, ultimately, most of the athletes did fine, but there may be some athletes who just can't handle that. But use the Zoom meetings and such with that. Then preparing, it kind of walks through with each phase things to go through, having the communicable disease waivers ready. I would even send them out ahead of time. They are tracked in GMS, and so you can get a list from your GMS person as to who has them already, but they don't need to fill a new one out for a new sport. But again, it kind of walks through all there and kind of mapping that out, and then some guidance there on the activity, things to do within that, and depending upon the phase. Notice that in each case, I think it was in the previous one, well, buried in there in each of them is they have to have the CDW. That's a brand new form, and it will likely be with us forever. Okay, so I was mentioning about some videos that got shot. These are used nationally, but we were lucked out and had our own people be the stars of the show. So let's pay attention to this.
In order to safely return to activity, Special Olympics recommends that participants wear a mask if on public transport, such as a bus, trolley, subway, or if carpooling with someone not living with them. If Special Olympics is providing transportation, face masks during travel and maintaining physical distance are required. Prior to entering any activity, practice, event, or gathering, all athletes, coaches, unified partners, volunteers, family members, and caregivers must participate in an on-site screening. It is important to take the necessary steps to create a safe on-site screening area. 1. Create a single point of entry. One entryway that allows participants to enter one at a time. Remember, we strongly advise outdoor spaces only in Phase 1. 2. Use chalk, tape, cones, or other markers to indicate what 6 feet or 2 meters looks like for physical distancing. 3. Make sure you have all the necessary supplies for a proper screening, which include temporal thermometer, pens, masks, gloves, disinfectant wipes or spray, hand sanitizer, COVID-19 participant code of conduct and risk assessment forms. Volunteers will fill out a monitoring form for each participant that passes through screening. The form includes the participant's name, contact info, temperature, answers to screening questions, and the outcome of the screening. For instance, can they participate or have they been isolated and sent home? Next, you will ask each participant the following required screening questions. We recommend using visual aids when asking the questions. 1. In the last 14 days, have you had contact with someone who has been sick with COVID-19? 2. Have you had a fever in the last week? Temperature of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.8 degrees Celsius, or higher? 3. Do you have a cough and/or difficulty breathing? 4. Do you have any other signs or new symptoms of COVID-19? Fatigue, muscle or body aches, headache, new loss of taste or smell, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea or vomiting, or diarrhea?
In the past 14 days, have you had contact with someone who has been sick with COVID?
Yes.
Yes, you have? Okay, so I'm gonna actually have you step down here.
If a participant answers yes to any questions, they must be isolated from the group, sent home, and instructed to contact their healthcare provider. Participants who are found to have COVID-19 symptoms must wait 7 days after symptoms resolve to return to activity, or must provide written proof of physician clearance to Special Olympics to return to activities. Participants who test positive or have COVID-19 must provide written medical clearance before returning to sport and fitness activities. After answering the screening questions, you will conduct on-site measurement of participants' temperatures using a thermometer, preferably a non-touch thermal scanning one if possible. If a thermometer is not available, you must ask participants to self-monitor and provide results of that monitoring. If there are any concerns about fever, temperature of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, 37.8 degrees Celsius or higher, the participant should not be allowed to remain on site. If high, you may retest the participant after 5 minutes to ensure temperature is accurate. Record all names, results, and contact information using the template provided, and keep in case needed for contact tracing or reporting. For more information on Special Olympics Return to Activity protocol and safety guidelines, visit resources.specialolympics.org or consult your local program.
So, Al, I saw your message. When the video is showing, I can't do anything with the computer, otherwise it stops the video. We did touch on that, I think, when you were blocked out. Al's asking, with the governor changing, this is worth repeating, with the governor changing the masking requirements, are we changing that? And the answer is no. The same standard, and we'll touch on masks in a bit, have not changed for Special Olympics. We follow whichever set of rules is more restrictive, okay? At least that's, there's no indication that that's going to change. But again, it is a bit of a dynamic situation, so something could change in the next month or two. Plan on having everybody follow what we've got here. They mentioned the 4 questions that are there and such. One thing to note with the symptoms that they mention and all that are listed there, it's key that what we're talking about here is a change. So if someone has a chronic condition where they regularly have congestion or a runny nose or whatever, any of the other things there, again, if it's chronic, if it's something that's always with them and that hasn't changed, then them answering, saying that yes, they have that, no, that doesn't count against them, if you will. It's if something's different, if something's changed, if something's new. And Jim, I'll get to your question in a moment. So if it's chronic, and you would know your athletes hopefully from your their medicals and just knowing them. Again, if it's chronic, that doesn't matter. It's just if something's new and such. And then the note there that they need to, if they can be checked again, and this is particularly going to be true if you guys, you're going to be out in the heat. Athlete could just get hot from driving up there and being there and such. So definitely give them 5 minutes or so to cool down. Hopefully there's a shady place to let them cool down, and then you can recheck their temperature and such. One of the things that we do recommend also is when you set up that screening place or that screening location, which is going to be part of every practice, that you have it as close to your parking area as you can. The reason being is it's, if they have to hoof it a good distance, number one, their temperature is going to go up before they get their check. But secondly, then they got to hoof it back, and someone's got to escort potentially the athlete back and forth and so on. If you can do it near the parking area, if there's an issue, they can get right back in their car and head out. Jim was asking about vaccinations. We are not tracking vaccinations. And I would not ask anybody about that. A lot of athletes, we did a CompFit program, a virtual competitive fitness program for a while, and that ended several weeks ago. But as athletes were getting their vaccinations, they were talking about it and so on. That's great, and we certainly do encourage people to get vaccinations. But we are not tracking that, and whether they have a vaccination or not makes no difference, at least at this point in time, makes no difference in how we apply things. Good question with that, just to be sure everybody's clear on that. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. So Zach, you want to toss up that last poll that we have? And if I remember correctly, this is again Yeah, check here, check all the statements that are true for there. And again, just, again, you may have to scroll and then hit submit, but all the statements that are true. Okay, let's take maybe another 15 seconds.
Yep, we're
Maybe not even that. It's they're closing in on the number, on the total. You guys can't see it, but we can see how many people have answered. That's what we're going by. So why don't we go ahead and close that? It looks like we've got pretty much everybody. And so the results there. So the answering at least 3, no, that is not true. They have to answer all 4 of them no. And again, I realize the little caveat I gave you about the conditions. That could be where those folks were a little confused on that. The no is, I have no new symptoms, maybe is the way to phrase it. So good. Temperature of 104, get rechecked. Yep, absolutely. It's not only athletes and unified partners. It is everybody who is there with you. In fact, and most areas have a different group of folks doing the screening for the coaches. And that is a best practice. That is something we highly recommend. It's really difficult for your coaches to do the screening, and also as athletes have checked in, get things going and get things organized. And in many cases, or in most cases, I think area leaders have been able to recruit people to help with that. That might be a great opportunity for some reliable family members who are fully, set up as volunteers to help out with this. But anyhow, even those people who are doing the screenings need to get screened themselves as well. So everybody, in fact, that's the first thing they do, is they screen each other. We had a small cycling competition, and Debbie Credito and Marianne Hayes were there doing the screening, and that's the first thing they did, was screened each other. So great, let's go ahead and close that down and move ahead. So and this has shifted a bit here in terms of where we are. I gave the most recent stuff here, but everybody, all the areas started in phase 1, and some have moved on to phase 2. Right now, I think there might be 3 areas as of today that are in phase 2, but everybody else is in phase 1 of those phases. Talk to your area leadership. If you get nothing else from this, talk to your area leadership with that. That the phase is decided by both the area leader and Jeff Abel and his role as leading this initiative here. Again, it kind of goes through some other stuff we talked about. We're going with whatever is most restrictive. And again, I'd mentioned that already. And also it varies area by area, and it can, depending upon the situation and with the area director, it could potentially vary by sport within your area. If a sport has a whole bunch of brand new people who have not done anything along these lines, that the area director may decide, let's start out in phase 1 for a little bit of time and then we'll move on, even if they could start out in phase 2. That's a decision for the area director to make. Again, if there's a failed screening, they segregate for step on the side, or you could have them go right home, but also make sure that the athlete knows, and anybody else who is with them and transporting them is aware of the situation and why they're going home because they failed, either because they couldn't answer all those questions no, or the temperature issue. After they've had, if they've gone home because they have symptoms, they need to wait 7 days after they've had 7 consecutive symptom-free days, so 14 days total. It's a little different from what was in the video, but this is how we've gotten the clarification on it. And then if they themselves have actually tested positive for COVID, they need to get a written medical clearance on that. The CDW, we mentioned it a few times. This is a new form. It's a standalone form right now. It's a 1-page form, but there's 2 pages that go with it that kind of give guidance and expectations. We'll see them in just a minute. But it does a couple things. It has in writing that they acknowledge, they understand that there are high-risk populations and there are conditions and situations, and there can be some hazard to that. It gives them specifics on how they're going to maintain themselves and behave within that situation to comply with the rules. It says explicitly that if they can't adhere to the behaviors or the requirements with this, then they will unfortunately be asked not to be at the program until we are back in phase 3, which again, hopefully will be in several months, but one never knows. And then it also has a release of liability for Special Olympics. We had, some of you had seen, I think, a former form that was called the AOR, or Acknowledgement of Risk form. This CDW has effectively replaced it. Even if they filled out that AOR, they must fill out a CDW. They don't need to fill it out for each sport. It's like your volunteer application or your medical or the protected behaviors. You do it once, it applies to everything. It does expire after 3 years. I mentioned before, we're tracking it in GMS. Again, the athlete or the individual or their guardian, if they are either a minor or have someone else, someone has guardianship over them, the guardian would need to sign on that. Within your program, we need to get, you need to have any of the forms that you fill out submitted to Special Olympics Maryland within 1 week of that person's first activity. Highly recommend, as a best practice, get them filled out ahead of time, and then you don't have to worry about it. These are also electronic signatures aren't counted on this. It does have to be actually signed with that. And again, they expire after 3 years, just as with the volunteer screening or background check and such. If they are a minor, they need to get do a new one of these when they turn 18, because then they can sign for themselves. But again, it's required for that. The form on the right, which you can see here, this is what they're actually signing and sending back. It's very simple. It's the name, please write it legibly, the signature, and the date signed. Be sure that we can read what that name is. Otherwise, it's not going to help us with that. This is all that needs to be sent back. If they need a guardian or a parent sign, that's here as well. These are the listings of the things that they're saying they will they'll adhere to, that they'll stay at home if they have symptoms, acknowledging they got education. They're going to wear a mask at all times when they're doing it, and we'll talk through it. I mean, there's how that applies. Wash your hands. Will not share drinking bottles, so on down the line. So they're acknowledging that as a part of that. You can download this form from the coach resource page, which hopefully everybody's gone to. This is the main coach resource page, not the sport specific ones. They're also available at the virtual SOMD, the return to play page on that. And again, needs to be to headquarters within 7 days. Talk to your area director again on how they are doing this. If they've had any of this, any live activity to date, they've got a process in place, and use that with that. Forms, yeah, Jack, they could be faxed. Yeah, as long as they get into us. Usually, since there's nothing secret on here, you could email them, but actually the best situation is, just as the area directors or the area leadership have a process for submitting medicals through our network, or submitting volunteer applications through our network, we really prefer that these be submitted through that same process. We've gone through it with the area leadership on how to do that. And then it goes to the location. If you fax it, somebody at our office is then going to have to scan it as well, and such. It just speeds up the process. Plus, it also goes, anything that's not part of the general procedure has a risk to getting missed or something. So Dottie from our office goes through checks every day. She may not be able to process everything every day, but goes through and keeps track of what needs to be done with these. And again, this is regardless of whether they did the acknowledgement of risk or the AOR before, everyone must do this. We will be folding this into, at some point in the future, it will become part of the volunteer application and it will become part of the medical form. That hasn't happened yet, but at some point that will be part of it. And so they're getting that filled out as a normal part of their renewal of that every 3 years. For right now, we have to have it as a separate waiver.
If somebody does need to fax those forms, and that's the only way that you can do it, that's okay, but give me an email or a heads up of some sort. I do live right around the corner from the office, essentially. I can then go in and grab them and scan them if needed. But again, like Mike said, my biggest worry is that they get faxed and nobody knows about them and they just kind of sit there and you don't get what you need submitted.
Yeah, and to clarify with that, because this was sort of an unsaid, but maybe folks don't know it. Most of our staff are not at the office right now. Most of our staff are working remotely. Dottie Rush, who handles all our medicals and all this other stuff here, she's working remotely. So I'm in the office fairly regularly and such, Zach occasionally and so on, but it's not like someone's sitting there like it was a year and a half ago, where everybody's there and anything that comes through on fax, they're going to see it right away. One other option, don't prefer it because it doesn't give a good picture, but in a pinch, if you need to take a picture of it and you can do it and it's in focus and everybody can read it and the signature and such is clear, you can use that and send it in. Please try other methods first. Those are just a little bit more cumbersome to deal with because they're not really PDFs and everything else is stored as a PDF and yada, yada, yada. This is what's on the other page. I mentioned there's 3 pages. The one form and then 2 other things. This just kind of runs down folks who are in some high risk situations and such with that. So I mentioned about the practice log that's there. This has changed since when we first did this. I think this has changed. Well, when the CDW came in, we changed it. It's almost the same, but you have your date. You're going to do one of these at every practice session, but you fill in the date, your area, so on down the line. You can pre-populate these with the name, the person type, the contact, email, and whether they've completed the CDW, because that's not going to change in theory at least. And then at the site, on site, fill in these 2 columns here. You have to use this template. Please do not go and create something on your own, even if you think it's the best thing since sliced bread. Consistency is key in getting things compliant and having things filled out properly. Please don't go on your own. It really will screw things up. So appreciate that. There's a blank copy of this form. It's on the coach resource page as well that you can download. Again, you either do that at the beginning of each practice session, and then these need to be sent into SOMD within 1 week of each practice session. Talk to your area leadership on the process that they already have in place. Let's use that same process. It's worked, from what I can tell, quite frankly, really well. We're tweaking it a little bit in the next couple of weeks based on some feedback for some areas, but just use the process that's there, and your area director can help you with that. And let's watch another video. Here we go.
Preparing the venue to safely welcome Special Olympics participants is vital for return to activity for phases 1 and 2. Arrive early to prepare the space. Start by ensuring the venue is disinfected or sanitized, especially the bathrooms and other high-touch areas. Wear disposable gloves for all tasks in the cleaning process, including the handling of trash. After sanitizing the space, set up signage that reinforces proper hygiene procedures, physical distancing, and wearing personal protective equipment, or PPE. Post signs in easy-to-understand language with visual cues in highly visible locations, like entrances and restrooms. The signs should describe how to stop the spread of germs by properly washing hands, following physical distancing guidelines, and explaining how to properly wear a cloth face covering. Also, make sure hand sanitizer and/or hand washing facilities or stations are available. Lastly, set up a single entry with screening and a single exit area, which means there should be one entrance into the venue and one exit out of the venue that allows participants to be at least 2 meters or 6 feet apart. For more information on Special Olympics Return to Activity protocol and safety guidelines, visit resources.specialolympics.org or consult your local program.
There we go. So just as a reminder, here's a list of different materials. Work with your area leadership, with your area director. They have or will acquire this stuff. We've provided them, this was back at the beginning of when we could first return to activity, some materials, and then the area leaders have kind of added that there. Most of them have that sign, those signs that are there. I'll need to check. I think those signs are also available on the coach resource page. If they aren't, I'll make sure that they're there in the COVID section in the next week or two. I just need to locate all of them myself. But yeah, work with your area directors on this and how they want to handle the equipment and such. Talked about face coverings. So when are face coverings required? I'm not going to read this to you. I'll summarize it here for you. For athletes and unified partners, they need to wear face coverings, their mask or their, well, just the face covering. We are allowing gaiters. They can't just use their shirt pulled up, but but most folks know that now. They need to wear it at all times during their practice session or when they're coming in, with the exception of when they are actually actively engaged in the training. So they need it when they as soon as they get out of their car, when they check in, when they go through the screening process, when they're getting assembled, or organized. When they then start either their warm-up, hopefully you're all doing warm-ups, as well as their stretches at the beginning of the practice, they can take them off at that point. And they can essentially leave them off until, assuming that they're actually, they're doing physical activity until the end of the practice. If you stop early and have a sit down and a team meeting, they should put them back on at that point. One of the things that we recommend is have a bunch of Ziploc bags, something for the athlete to put their face mask in when they take it off. Don't go and collect them all. If you do, and they're not already in Ziploc bags, you're just going to get cross-contaminated. But in most cases, I think for kayaking, they probably have a bag of their stuff that they can just put it in at that point. And that's not always the case for every sport, but they can do that. So athletes, partners, wear it except where they need to have a mask on, except when they're actively involved or engaged in physical activity. And then at the end of the practice, after they've done their cool downs and stretches, then they need to put it back on. It's essentially the same for coaches and other volunteers there, with the understanding that in many cases, the coach is not actually actively involved with the physical activity. So in most cases, they're going to be wearing their mask throughout. If the coach is doing the activity with them as opposed to instructing, then they can take the mask off. If they're out there, if you're all out on the water and you're paddling with your athletes, you can take your mask off at that point too, and such. But otherwise, need to have it on. So, I mean, that maybe is the kind of rule of thumb is physical activity, you can take it off. Otherwise, has to stay on, applies to everybody. So, okay. And let's catch our last video.
As a coach, you have a critical role in ensuring the safety of your participants. It is necessary to adapt some of your coaching strategies to lead safe practices under Special Olympics' new Return to Activity guidelines. Before each activity, communicate the need for high-risk individuals to participate at home, and have all participants complete the COVID-19 Participant Code of Conduct and Risk Assessment forms. Forms may be tracked in GMS if the program would like. During practice, it is important to maintain physical distancing of at least 6 feet or 2 meters between all participants. To do this, place markers on the ground to indicate what 6 feet is and have extra volunteers to remind participants to maintain their distance. We know it is difficult, but to ensure the safety of everyone participating, there are no fist bumps, high fives, hugs, or huddles right now during this COVID-19 pandemic. You can still support your friends and teammates by cheering each other on. All participants should come to the activity with their own supplies and cannot share masks, water bottles, towels, or uniforms. In Phase 2, the use of shared equipment is allowed, but should be limited. All equipment will be disinfected between each use. Wear face masks throughout activities, including arrivals and departures. Do not touch the outside of the mask. Do not scratch or touch your face. Masks do not need to be worn during active exercise. However, if sneezing, coughing, or yawning without a face mask on, participants should cover their faces with a tissue or elbow, not their hands, and throw away any tissues and wash their hands immediately. Throughout the activity, use verbal and visual signs to remind participants about hygiene, standard infection prevention, physical distancing, and use of personal protective equipment, or PPE. For more information on Special Olympics Return to Activity protocol and safety guidelines, visit resources.specialolympics.org or consult your local program. This
is just some listing of some resources that are available. Again, we have the interactive webinars, and there'll be some additional live ones. There's also, if you're on our social media, our Twitter or Facebook or whatever, there's these Wellness Wednesdays that go into it. Working with the NGBs, I'm not sure if we got anything specific to kayaking and such. And then we do have volunteer training that goes into working during COVID or during the return to activity. That's done, I think, at least once a month with that. And if I recall that, yeah, so before I hand it off to Zach to talk a little bit more specific about how to apply this within your program, are there any questions on the overall phases, what's required, that type of thing? You can either raise your hand or type it in the chat. And I do not see, oops, I lost being able to see the participants. Just a minute. Okay, I don't think we have that. So Zach, I am going to mute, but I'll be here if there are any issues.
All right.
Go for it.
We're going to move into a little bit more of the kayaking specific pieces here. So we're going to apply returning to activity that we just learned about to kayaking. So I'm going to throw a question out there. Feel free to unmute. Feel free to raise your hand. You can call out an idea or whatever. But can somebody share with me some thoughts about what are implications of the requirement for social distancing on kayaking? So what is something with kayaking related that social distancing comes into play that you'd have to think about for your training sessions?
We carry our paddles in a bag, so only one athlete can approach the bag of paddles to grab their paddle and then move out of the way for the next athlete to get their paddle.
Yep, that's perfect, Gene. That's one I would have never even thought of. That's the first time I've heard about the bag thing, but that's spot on. Anybody else have anything?
Our paddles are stored openly in the trailer with people's names on them. I sprayed them before the beginning of the workout. The life jackets are kept in tubs with each athlete assigned their own life jacket. And again, these are sanitized when we come back from practice, and then when just before I use them, take them out of the trailer and put them back on the athletes.
Yeah, perfect. That's a lot like Gene's example. You know, it's going to be a little bit slower for distribution of equipment for sure.
One of the other things I do is, of course, the athletes have to carry the kayaks from the trailer approximately, as you saw, about 100 feet to the water. And it takes two of them. There's lines on each end. So they are automatically, because of the length of the boat, 10 to 12 feet apart. And so that is not an issue. And when they come back, I do spray the handles. Once they're on the water, all athletes and all participants have to wear masks until we get on the water. Once we get on the water, then they can take the masks off. We do our paddling, and then when we come back, we put the mask on and we carry the boats up, etc. And I do have a group of parents who do the checking temperatures and this type of thing.
Perfect. That's a great plan, Jack. Team Russell, I see that you're unmuted, and you've gone through this process a little bit last summer too.
Yeah, we actually, you know, our all of our volunteers and everybody got there early, and we took all the kayaks and put them at the waterfront with the paddles already in them, and everything's disinfected before the athletes even show up. And then we have you know, if we have two sessions, we set up a 15-minute spread between the leaving of one group and then the next, so we can disinfect everything for the next group. We actually allowed our athletes to take their life jackets home with them for the season and bring them back every week, so that they didn't have to worry about anybody touching somebody else's. So, and then we also, as Jack said, we had our own volunteer group up at the top of the hill that did all the screening for us and sent them down the hill one at a time as they arrived.
Yeah,
and of course, during all the warm-ups, we, you know, had everybody social distance warming up, and the masks did come off once they got in their boat. And we did try to give them plastic bags to put them in so they wouldn't get all wet and all that grimy stuff, but didn't always work, but that was the attempt anyhow. Over.
Yeah, no, that's great. Luckily, I got a chance to travel down to St. Mary's to see the start of one of their training sessions last year before a thunderstorm rolled in, but everything looked really good. Here's some other notes. No tandem kayaking, with the caveat, unless it's somebody from the same household. Again, can't really social distance yourself in a tandem kayak, but if it is a brother-sister combo, a son-daughter, or a parent and son combo, if it's a caregiver and an athlete as well, those are combos that if they are living together, they're okay to do tandem kayaking. Again, because of the social distancing, can't tandem kayak with non-shared household members. Again, you know, like Jim was saying about, you know, spreading all the boats out on the beach to launch. Jack doesn't necessarily at his location have the same long beach that Jim has down there in St. Mary's. So Jack may have to do a timed up distance launch where, you know, 2 or 3 athletes are going at a time, where Jim Russell can line up 10 boats along the beach, and as athletes come, you put butts in boats and they shove off. Again, and one of the toughest ones again is some individuals might not be happy that no high fives, no handshakes, no fist bumps, no hugs. Our athletes love to see each other. Our athletes love to see you as coaches, but you know, with the social distancing aspect in place, just can't do that stuff yet. Looks like we do have a question. Mike, if you can check that question and cover that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Applying more to your program. So we're going to talk about implications on no indirect contact for phase 1. So what are some things, indirect contact, that you can't do in phase 1? You know, we kind of talked about the paddles and how you kind of can't hand one paddle from somebody to another person without disinfecting it in phase 1.
You can't help somebody in and out of the boat.
Yep. Yeah. And unfortunately, realistically, even in phase 2, you can't help somebody in and out of a boat, right? Because helping somebody, if you're touching them, that's direct contact, right? And you can't do that in either or. There could be helping someone in and out of the boat by holding the back of the boat, potentially could be okay, but that would probably be about it.
What we did in our practices is if an athlete needed assistance getting in and out of the canoe, we would have to have a caregiver or a parent or somebody become a volunteer and be that helpmate for that launching and recovery. Over.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah,
the same
100%.
thing.
Yep. Jack, did you have something else to add? I saw you put your hand up.
Well, I was going to say, I do the same thing for my athletes, the caregivers for the athletes that need assistance to get in and out of the boat are have to help them get in and out. Not any of our other coaches or assistants.
Yeah, for sure. Al, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that if you have a caregiver, does that caregiver then get counted as part of that group of 10?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the trade-off. That's tough, right? The second you need a caregiver to assist somebody, it eats up your numbers, which isn't always a bad thing, but that does mean that they're part of your potential 10 to 50 number.
Yeah.
Again, yep.
I was just going to say the good thing for us, and that you folks would be glad to know, is that with limiting the group size to 10, and I have 2 1-hour sessions, I will probably have enough kayaks that I can assign kayaks and paddles to each individual for the first time ever. And, after 16 years, 15 if you don't count last year, I know we'll have enough kayaks for everybody. There might be a couple, depending upon how we arrange the groups, and that'll be something I have to work on because of the kayaks that people have traditionally been assigned to. But probably only going to have 6 athletes for the first hour, and then swap them out for another 6 the second hour. I think with that situation, I should be able to get everybody their own kayak for the entire season, and I think I can do the paddles.
That's a great luxury to have. One thing I will note from an experience being at Piney Run, which this would affect Stu, your program, is they have the assisted boat launch for folks that have disabilities, physical disabilities and such. And they have the railings that you hold yourself and sit down in it and kind of pull yourself out. And then you also pull yourself back in phase 1 via indirect contact. If you have athletes using that, you would have to sanitize the handrails before each athlete comes in. This is something that we struggled with swimming. But again, think about the touch points that you have when it comes to indirect contact and direct contact for your facility. It's going to be different for everyone's programs that go through. Jack, you got something?
Yeah, the rule of thumb I use is I have one assistant coach or safety person, if you want to call it that, for every 3 athletes max on the water. So if you have a limitation of 10, you're going to have, let's say, a limited number of athletes on the water, as well as your coaches and assistants.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to point out, I said this to Mike, answering his question, the National Kayak Team, which is the governing body for canoe and kayak competition in the United States, does not have any SO component for training or anything. They do have what they call para canoe, which is for people with disabilities. I've had Mike Adams participate in this program, but they don't have anything. And right now their program is out in left field. They are doing prep for the Paralympic competition, but that's the extent of their activity right now.
Click the wrong button here. There we go. Thanks for the add on that, Jack. That's a big help. That's good information for the crew here. I'm gonna ask one last question here and have somebody chime in. And I think Jim's already ready to go with the, how do you teach an athlete the proper stroke? I know sometimes an athlete really kind of needs to go hand in hand to work through the paddling stroke. How are you going to teach an athlete that with social distancing and no direct contact?
Well, if you wear a mask and you stand behind the athlete, then you can reach out and control their hands from behind. And with the mask, it will make a big difference. And you're above them normally. They would be sitting in the kayak and you would be above them if you have to have a direct contact type of assistance. Otherwise, you basically have them sit in the boat and you I stand in the water, believe it or not, up to knee deep, in front of them and have them mimic. You do the stroke technique and you have them mimic as you do it. And if you're holding, I hold the front of the boat so it doesn't go anywhere. And they sit there and they paddle. And of course, the boat is 12 feet long, so I'm 6 feet away from them anyway.
Yeah, I think the standing in front of the boat's a great way to go. Visualize. It's more of a visual medium at this point than a tactile learning situation for athletes. I know for some of them that might not be the most ideal way, but unfortunately, until we get through this, it's very much a visual learning scenario for our athletes.
Yeah. Well, and just to clarify,
Yes.
so Jack, I think your idea with standing behind is good under other situations, but even wearing a mask, you still have to be 6 feet away from the athlete. So unfortunately, until we're in phase 3, that wouldn't be something that would work, even wearing a mask. So, but sounds like a great way to do it in other situations.
Yeah, for sure. So any questions on the return to activity, Jim?
Yeah, just a quick question. Jack, I know that you were attempting to make some videos. Did any of those videos get completed?
Yeah. I'll hop in here really quick.
Let me make one more interjection if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I know we talked about all the social distancing and all the things that we're doing to keep separated from everyone. But when you're on the water, and if you were to have an athlete turn over, you're gonna throw all that out the window.
Yeah.
You're not gonna say, I can't come any closer than 6 feet. You're gonna go grab them. You're gonna help them back in their boat. So, just throw it out the window. You're gonna take care of them. You're gonna keep them safe. Worry about the COVID crap later. Over.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's something, we typically don't point out because we'd like to think that is conventional logic. But it's good that you brought up the point there, Jim. If you have an athlete that falls out of their boat, help your athlete. Be smart about it. Do whatever you can, but the athlete's safety comes first. You're not going to let an athlete drown because of non-direct contact. Like, help that athlete. Jim's 100% right there. And on the topic of the videos, we did have videos completed for visual learning for training, mostly at home, but could be used for training sessions as well. They are part of our virtual training guide that we have put together. We are doing the first review of the first draft now and are hoping in the next few weeks that virtual training guide is ready. When I send the email following up with the slides and the recording for this, I will also give you the link to the YouTube videos directly that are outside of the virtual training guide. You can go in there and look at them already right away. We did 2 videos on stroke, one on an erg machine, which a lot of folks I recognize they don't have, but it still applies to the way you can work to train. And then one with like a broomstick and sitting in a chair as well. And then we did 2 videos on how you can work out and work on core strength, upper body strength, and endurance at home as well. Jack and 2 of his friends from out on the shore there, Ricky, who did the video work and then did the editing, did a phenomenal job. The videos came out really great. So those will be available essentially as soon as I send the email out. You can always go onto YouTube if you're feeling super interested this evening and type in SOMD kayaking, and it'll give you what you're looking for. Jim, anything else?
Thank you very much. Yep. Thank you for making those, Jack.
Jack.
I think that the most important thing at this point is to make sure that all of your boats have flotation built, the beach balls and stuff like that. The float tanks in the front and back of those boats leak, so they'll fill up with water to get the beach balls in there as well.
Yeah, the beach ball ad in the front and back of the boat's always a great ad. Again, makes the boat a lot more retrievable and safer for the athletes if they do capsize. As long as it doesn't bury itself and stick itself in the mud in the Chester River, you should be able to get it back, which is great. If it does get stuck in the mud, we will figure out how to get it for you. Other than that, we'll kind of move along here. Again, we kind of give you the reminder up front that you got to have all your athlete medicals in. You got to have all your certifications as coaches in and volunteers in, and that CDW form before anyone participates. Again, nobody can participate without that stuff. It's important that you have that stuff turned in. Kathy, are you raising your hand? Okay. I thought I saw a hand and wanted to double check. Important dates for you guys to know for kayaking deadlines. Training registration deadline is 7/7/21. Again, that's you got to have all your athletes that are participating in training for the year into GMS to be eligible to move forward for kayaking state championships, not summer games that's listed there that we will fix. Last date to submit missing forms. So any of your athletes that need updated medicals or happen to get an updated medical in time, any coaches that update certifications, make sure those are in no later than the 14th of July, which is a week after that training registration deadline. So I would set a note for yourself that when you put in the training registration on the 7th, make a note for yourself to follow up on any missing forms ASAP after that. Again, everything has to be good through the championship state. It has to be good through 8/14, all medicals, all coaches certifications through 8/14. And then the competition registration deadline is the 27th because our time trials is scheduled for the 7th this year. And we want to make sure we have enough time to follow up with you guys, make sure you got everyone in and double check the competition registration that you submitted. Again, what's required for each participant? You guys have seen this for the coach's education model. Essentially, everybody's required the normal things. Athletes need their medicals, volunteers and coaches need their applications, their background checks, protected behavior screening, concussion, your sports certifications if you're a head coach. The thing that is added that everybody needs this year and moving forward is the communicable disease waiver. Again, make sure those CWs are in early. They need to be in a week before you start practicing. So make sure you're getting those out and getting people filling those out as soon as you can. So a note for everybody is that we will be holding a kayaking coaches training, hopefully in person. It is currently scheduled for in person because things look good. Sunday, June 6th, and it's going to be at Middle Branch Park in Baltimore. It's a little bit more centralized location. We love going out to Washington College, but Baltimore's a little more centralized for folks. So you can click that register here link when I send out the slides for you. You could also go to the coach resource page for kayaking, and it is available there for registration as well. So again, we are hoping that this will be in person. Anybody that registers, if we do have to flip it to online at the last second, we will notify them as soon as we make that decision. But again, fingers crossed, everything's starting to look good with the vaccinations. We should be able to do an in-person training and put together a really good opportunity for everyone. The events that we're offering this year, we are going to offer all the events that we typically offer, but realistically, we probably won't be offering any doubles. I think we have probably about 5 or 6 unified doubles teams. So it's probably just too tough to get 2 traditional athletes as doubles partners that live in the same house and happen to be at the same house, that happen to be the same paddling level. It's just too hard to put together this year. But we will offer all of our single individual 100 meter, 200 meter, 500 meter, and 1K races. So no worries on us cutting any events this year. Just the doubles stuff we will be cutting due to social distancing. So the dates for time trials and championships. Time trials is currently scheduled for August 7th and the championships are scheduled for August 14th. The game plan is at Washington College Boathouse. There still are some things that Washington College has to determine and figure out with folks coming from off campus to on campus for opportunities. So I will ask you all to remain flexible in case we do need to make a change. I know Ben and Jack are both really hopeful that we will be at the college as usual. And that is our main game plan. Note for yourselves too that we did set up rain dates for the next day after for both dates as well. Rain date for the time trials is the 8th. Rain date for championships is the 15th. So for the most part, time trials, championships, same game plan as usual, with the recognition that we will probably be in phase 2, hopefully at that point. Maybe things will take a really good turn with vaccinations and we do get into phase 3, but if we're in phase 2, there will be some reduced numbers, or we may do it in half-day shifts. So again, I just ask you to be flexible. We're going to offer the opportunities like we typically do. They are just going to have a little bit of a different look to them this year, more than likely based on the phases. Again, the tentative plan is a one-day event as usual, unless because of the phases, we really have to split things up. Then we may do 2 half-days. We may do one day where we do 2 half-day sessions. Again, right now, we're a little too far out to make a full determination on that. So I ask you guys to be a little flexible on that. Probably limited attendance. You guys have seen the restrictions for phase 2, what our numbers for attendance are. So we may, again, do 2 half-day sessions. We don't think we're going to have to reduce any other events on top of what we're going to offer with all the individual races. But, you know, we'll kind of reach out to coaches, see what they're thinking, see if there's any situations where, you know, we may drop an event or something. We are asking you guys to still hold an in-house qualifying day. It doesn't need to be a full-blown qualifier, but we still want you guys to get times for your athletes for qualifying purposes. Again, it helps us division for time trials to make time trials really nice and smooth. And then that allows championships to be even smoother. So we are asking for one in-house qualifier to get qualifying times. It doesn't need to be the typical full-blown, you know, deal. We'd like you to get your 500-meter course set up. And if you need assistance with that, let me know. I'm more than happy to help with those as well. And last bullet point, I'm just going to reiterate, be open and flexible to possibilities. We're going to try to run it as usual as much as we possibly can. But based on restrictions, may have to be a little flexible. Some potential other training opportunities if your program does not go back in person, or if you guys do not go back in person right away. The virtual training guide, which I mentioned for kayaking, is coming soon. Again, we have the first draft that is getting a look over right now, and hopefully that'll be ready in the next week or two. Competition fitness, which Mike Sarnowski mentioned earlier, is a virtual fitness competition, which you can also do in person at a park. So if for some reason you can't get in the boats this year, but you can get an open space at a park, you can always do competition fitness, which is great. And then also I mentioned, you know, just some good dry land training, get the team together, get in shape, exercise, you know, get out and enjoy the sun a little bit. So the virtual training guide for kayaking, it's an 8 to 10 week training guide that you can do virtually with your team. Again, it's built around at-home physical strength training and endurance training that you can do at home. Jack came up with a lot of fantastic training ideas that he's used in the past as well. I got to be the guinea pig to show a lot of those exercises, and I was definitely not in shape enough to do them long term. So luckily Jack didn't run me too ragged. And then there's also training on paddling and paddling at home. Jack, do you want to add something to what we talked about?
I think you have to mention that your instruction to me was to set up and use equipment that was readily available at home without having to go out and buy anything special.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. Like I said, for the paddling at home, 2 chairs and a broomstick is essentially what we use to simulate paddling. If you have a paddle at home, great. A lot of the times they're too long to sit in a chair anyway. But then the other thing that I found really creative that Jack says he's been using for a while for strength and endurance training, and simulating paddling for that. Jack uses like 2 cans of like soup or beans or something, and you can still do your paddling motion, and you still get that feel of the water resistance to it because of the what's inside of the cans kind of sloshes around and gives you a little bit of the feeling of the motion as well. So really great stuff that Jack came up with. Again, thanks to Ricky for coming out, recording those, and also editing them. I'm really excited for you guys to see those videos and to take a look at the virtual training guide when it comes out. Gonna hit some rules reminders. You know, this, you guys are used to this from the typical webinars. Again, check out our coach resource page for all the rules. You guys should usually have a copy of them on you guys. Uniforms, you guys know the deal for the most part. You know, shirts, shorts, pants during practices and competitions. You need some sort of PDF, type 3 with an attached whistle. The whistle is always a great added feature just in case. And again, all athletes and partners need to wear them while they're on the water or on the dock. Again, we want safety for all of them. Helmets are optional. Water shoes and polarized sunglasses are definitely great to have. And I will also add that a hat is not bad either. As somebody that sunburns very easily, I like to wear a hat as much as I can when I'm on the water. Again, not going to go through every one of these rules. You guys will get the slides. But you guys know the main deal with the kayaking rules, especially safety as a water sport. One of the big ones that we like to remind folks of is athletes need to be seizure-free for 1 year prior to competing. That's all open water sports for Special Olympics, kayaking, sailing, open water swimming, triathlon, all that falls into place for all of those. Equipment regulations, we've gone through this, talks about the kayaks. Again, that they're marked with their appropriate size. Most kayaks are somewhere. Yes, Mr. Jang.
There we go. Hey, on the previous slide, talked about the safety boat requirement.
Yep.
We typically, one of my assistants is typically in a power boat. He helps me set up the lanes and everything, and he's out there to safety boat for practice. But has very little close contact, physical contact, or not even, physically being close to it. Does he count as part of the 10?
On the water, you're a little bit more socially distant. If it's going to be one of those things now, like use your judgment, good judgment about how far they are. If you feel like they're within a kayak or two of your athletes on the water, probably, if you can get them a little further out. But again, you want your safety boat to be within logical distance of your athletes.
Yeah.
So I will say it's one of those things for swimming. Lifeguards 100% count towards the number when they're on the deck with the pool. It's a little bit more closer proximity wise.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where it might be part of the investment for having your safety boat count as part of your 10.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. No, great question. Great question for return to activity for sure. Again, we'll ask you guys for competition to label your boats with your athletes' names on it. Again, I think that went really well last time, especially when we had volunteers helping pull boats. Again, we will assess how boats get pulled for time trials and championships as we get closer. But again, it's really good for you to have your boats labeled. Again, you guys know a lot of the equipment regulations. Again, water safety, coaches aren't allowed on the water for competition unless previously designated as a safety boat or a line helper, or something comes up that we talk about prior to competition. But again, as a coach during a training session, I highly recommend that you're on the water. The closer that you can be while staying socially distant with your athletes is the best bet for sure. Rules for events, we always use the same command: athlete ready, followed by that air horn. Mr. Mike Myers, that's his favorite, 2 weekends of the year, just blowing that air horn. Wife doesn't let him do it at home, but he loves to do it on the dock. So he always uses that same starting, cues. So we highly recommend that you get your athletes used to it. It's like being on the track with the gun as well. It might be worth investing in an air horn to get your athletes used to the air horn again. Again, no coaching is permitted from the shoreline. family members, remind your family members and stuff. You can say, go, good job. There's a very thin line of go faster. I typically recommend not to give command words like that. But again, cheer on your athletes, make sure they know that you're there to support them. But again, you are not coaching from the shoreline. Again, if a competitor falls out of their kayak, they'll be given the opportunity to re-enter. If not, they will be rescued. Just like Jim said before, we're going to save athletes. We're not worried about social distancing if somebody goes overboard. We're saving athletes. That's priority number one, is safety for athletes. Again, some of the rules, if an athlete travels outside of their lane, 5-second penalty will be enforced. We highly enforce that at championships. We tend to not enforce that so much at time trials because you're kind of hurting your own time anyway. We will occasionally rerun races at time trials if there is a infraction like that to get a better time. Again, if the athlete's fully outside of their lane, it's a DQ. And that's probably what we see the most DQs for, are athletes going outside of their lanes. So again, when you get the opportunity at training or when you do your qualifying day, the more you can set up lanes like we have at time trials, the better off your athletes are getting prepared to do that. Even for myself, it's not easy to get off the line and go straight right away. So that's something to work on with your athletes. Again, at the 100 meter race, the 1K, the kayak that's in the lead always has a right of way at all times. The yield rule that is in there as well. I don't think we've ever really had too many issues with that, honestly. Finally, again, just a whole bunch of resources for you guys to access as coaches for kayaking. American Canoe Association has some good stuff for you to get into on there. Again, the kayaking event guide will be distributed prior to the event. Coach resource page, make sure you're checking out the coach resource page every few weeks. We like to put information up there. If I find anything interesting as I'm combing the internet for stuff, I will drop it on there as well. And for the most part, that's kind of the resources that you guys know to work with. If you ever have questions, of course, I'm a resource as well. Feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call on my cell phone. Just reach out. Questions, don't hold anything back. I'd rather you ask questions up front than us to get to time trials or championships and then get stuck with a question that's harder to answer on site. So again, reach out. We'll always get you guys taken care of, and we'll figure out whatever we need for your athletes.
Hey, Zach, just one suggestion also for folks. You mentioned that you'll put stuff up if you find anything.
Yeah.
If anybody else, if you find some great resources, it's not something that you could upload yourself, but this is a community. And I know one of the things I'm so thrilled with kayaking and several other sports is just how collegial and how mutually supportive folks are. So if you come across a great resource, let Zach know and he'll put it in the queue to pop it on there so other folks can access it. So
yeah. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm working with my Canadian compatriots to get some training information and resources for us to use as well.
Fantastic. Thanks for doing that, Jack. You are obviously very connected to the kayaking and canoe world, so we appreciate you connecting us with your resource as well. At this point, I will open it up for questions based on kayaking specific items. If you have any return to activities questions that popped up as we've been going along, feel free to ask those as well. But otherwise, that's kind of the end of our presentation here. Questions, comments, concerns. Again, if you think of something along the lines, you guys have my email. I believe most of you should have access to my cell number at this point. Again, I'm not in the office, so call my cell. If not.
Hey, Zach, this is Jim Russell. Just a quick note for you. We're changing our venue this year. We're going to a different location. So
okay.
It's just about a mile down the road from where we were, still in the same body of water, but we'll actually be in kind of a cove lagoon area that's a little more sheltered and hopefully work better for us. And we've actually secured some possible storage area for our stuff Over.
Yeah, fantastic. I know you guys were talking about that last year. Maybe I'll get a chance to take a trip down again as well. You know, and with that as well, if you guys want me to pop out to a practice, say hi, I'm more than welcome to. I don't like to pop out without announcing and have you guys surprised that I'm there. So, you know, if you ever need anything, again, just continue to ask. Chris, I think you have a question. There you go.
Yeah. Question for Jack is, when does the first practice start?
19th,
Huh?
19th of May. We're
19th.
doing,
Thank you.
and we're doing it at the beach area near my house. I'll send you an email on it.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, Zach, two things. So not to volunteer your time, but one thing that Zach is really good at, and I'm sure and others can help as well. If you want someone to come out and take a look at your facility beforehand and kind of think through how you can use it, we've done that for, we went out to Anne Arundel for their track program. We went to several others, you know, for different sports. That's certainly something that we can arrange. Just, you know, we'll coordinate that through Zach. If Zach himself isn't able to be there, we have some other folks, myself, Steve, so on that could, I know you might have to put up with having Steve come, but
I was just gonna say, I'm not gonna put people through having to deal with Steve. Don't worry, folks.
the other thing
Steve is fine.
That's right. The other thing that we've offered with some other groups, and I toss it here, is a couple weeks into the typical season, there may be value in having just a little confab of interested coaches to share ideas of what's working and what's not. Nothing formal in terms of stuff, but just kind of a chance to get together and just toss around ideas of, you know, hey, this worked for us. Hey, we've tried this and failed miserably, whatever. Would that be something that would be potentially of value without putting a date on it right now, whatever? But like I say, about 2 or 3 weeks into the season when you have some experience actually working through stuff. Is that whether a head nod or a thumbs up or whatever, if you think that would be good.
Yeah, I can, as part of the email, I can send out a reminder. And if folks want to reply to the email, that'll be good too. Or I could even send out a survey, but we'll put a little note in there about potentially getting together once the season kicks off to toss around ideas for sure.
Great. And it looks like Jean has her hand.
I do. As the weather gets nicer, where we practice, it's a lovely park, and often parents bring their lawn chairs and sit in the upper parking lot while the athletes go down and out on the water. I will be having every parent and body on the premises complete a CDW. I'll be checking temperatures, but they are not, do they need to keep wearing their masks while they're sitting in the parking lot? Am I the mask police because they are semi-associated at this point with Special Olympics, even though they've brought their athletes? So what have other areas done as far as parents hanging out and policing their behavior?
So I'll take that. And I'm a fan of Governor Hogan, but he just complicated things yesterday. But if they are completely removed, they're not part of the program in terms of any activity, they wouldn't be counted in your group of 50. They're there on their own. Don't worry about that. They come down to where you are and they're in that vicinity, different story. But if they're up there, they're, you know, they're doing whatever, given the removal of the mask mandate for the state of Maryland, you know, they're not there with you. They could be sitting in their car effectively. And so I'll give you that as a decision. How's that?
All right, thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Other questions that folks may have? I'm not seeing anybody speak. up. I'm not seeing any hands. Mike, do we have any questions via chat?
I do not see anything there. So
I do not see anything either. So I will
people want to
say
see the draft. That's what it is. So
the NFL draft is on, and that is near and dear to my heart. So that is what I'm moving on to next. But before I do so, I want to thank all of you guys for hopping on tonight. I know this is right in the middle of the spring season, so this is kind of popped up on folks as a little bit of a surprise. But again, I appreciate you guys taking time out of your evening, as you do year after year, to sit down and do this. And then on top of that, to create a game plan for successfully going back to kayaking for your programs. I'm sure Mr. Dooley and Kyle Russell can attest to on this meeting here that they are very excited to get back to training and getting back on the water. And so I'm excited to see all of you guys hopefully sometime soon. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out what you guys need. And we'll make it happen, and we'll figure out what we need to do to get your athletes back and participating in a safe way, so they can enjoy the summer out on the water in the boats. And other than that, I just can't thank you guys enough for everything you do. Without you guys, none of this happens. I say that year after year, but it's more true and more true year after year after year. So thank you guys as always. Mike, if you have anything to add, Jack, if you have anything to add, feel free to chime in. If not, we'll shut it down for the night, and you guys will see a follow-up email from me with resources and the recordings to this relatively soon.
yeah, just an echo of your thanks to everyone. Looking forward to hopefully having kayaking the first sport that's somewhat close to normal. So great. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
folks.
Zach
Have a
and
good
Mike.
night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Night.